Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep on something observed by millions around the world, fasting, specifically during Ramadan.
Oh, fascinating topic.
Yeah, we've got medical advice from French diabetes organizations, articles on the spiritual and health sides of Ramadan from Moroccan and international organizations,
Wow.
and even a French radio segment, all about personal experiences with fasting.
It's amazing, isn't it, how Ramadan brings together faith, health, and cultural traditions, like all in one.
Yeah, definitely. And with all these global perspectives, it'll be interesting to go beyond just the simple summaries you usually hear.
Definitely.
We're going to be looking at both the benefits and the potential risks of fasting, especially for people dealing with diabetes.
Important stuff.
Yeah. But before we get into all the complicated stuff, maybe let's just back up a sec. What exactly is Ramadan?
Okay, so Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar.
Right.
And it's a time of, really deep spiritual reflection and purification for Muslims.
Okay.
For the whole month, they don't eat or drink from dawn till dusk.
Wow.
But this fasting, it's not, just about the physical part,
Right.
It's really tied in with spiritual growth and social connections, too.
Ah, interesting. So that's where suhoor and iftar come in. I've heard of those terms, but I never really understood what they mean.
Yeah, you got it. So suhoor is that pre-dawn meal,
Okay.
kind of like a super breakfast, to fuel you through the whole day.
Right, right.
And then when the sun sets, that's when you break the fast with iftar.
Uh-huh.
And it often becomes this beautiful social occasion where families and communities get together.
So it's not just a solo thing then. It's really woven into the fabric of community life.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. But what about the spiritual side of it? Our sources talk about self-discipline, empathy, and connecting with God as big reasons why people fast.
Right.
Can you say more about that?
Sure. So fasting during Ramadan, it's more than just not eating or drinking.
Right.
It's about cultivating this self-control, resisting what you crave, and ultimately, building a stronger connection with yourself and with God.
Okay.
By actually feeling hunger and thirst, they start to understand those who face these struggles every single day.
Yeah.
And that can lead to more empathy and a desire to help those who are less fortunate.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like stepping outside of your own experience and seeing the world and your place in it in a whole new way.
Yeah, exactly.
But this whole idea of resisting desires, that's pretty intriguing. Is there a psychological benefit beyond just willpower,
Absolutely. I think of it this way. Every time you resist a craving, you're basically working out your mental muscles.
Okay.
This self-discipline, it can spill over into other areas of your life.
Oh, okay.
It can improve your emotional regulation, your resilience. It's about becoming aware of your needs and desires, not just being controlled by them.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. So it's not just deprivation. It's about getting a deeper understanding of yourself.
Exactly.
Now, we can't ignore the potential health benefits that come with fasting,
Right.
especially with all the talk about intermittent fasting these days. What are our sources saying about the positive impacts on the body?
Well, there's more and more evidence showing that fasting, when done right, and safely, of course,
Right.
can have some pretty incredible health benefits.
Okay.
So by not eating, you're basically encouraging your body to use those stored energy reserves.
Right, right.
And it gives your digestive system a much-needed break. This can actually lead to better insulin sensitivity, which is super important for controlling your blood sugar levels.
So it's like hitting the reset button on your body, making it more efficient at using its resources.
Exactly. And there's this other thing called autophagy.
Oh, autophagy, right.
It's a fascinating process that happens at the cellular level, and it gets triggered during fasting.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it, but I could never quite wrap my head around what it actually is.
Okay, so think of it like a spring cleaning for your cells.
Okay, all right.
Right. Autophagy is basically a self-eating process where your body finds and gets rid of any damaged parts inside your cells.
Ah, interesting.
It's like a natural way to recycle and regenerate, helping your cells to function at their best.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So fasting could actually help with cellular rejuvenation.
Yeah.
It sounds almost too good to be true.
Well, yeah, the potential benefits are definitely exciting, but it's really important to remember that there are risks involved, too.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is especially true for people with diabetes, where fasting needs to be approached with caution and medical guidance.
That's a really good point. And we're definitely going to talk more about those risks and considerations.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we do, I'm curious about the specific challenges fasting might have for people with diabetes. What makes it so tricky for them?
Well, with diabetes, it's all about finding that right balance,
Right.
Food intake, medication, exercise, it all plays a part in keeping those blood sugar levels stable.
Yeah.
But fasting can kind of mess with that balance.
Oh, I see.
It can increase the risk of both hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar,
Okay.
and hyperglycemia, which is high blood sugar.
And those swings could be pretty dangerous, right, if they're not managed properly.
Oh, absolutely. Our sources, especially those French diabetes organizations, they really emphasize talking to your doctor first.
Yeah.
Before you even think about fasting, especially if you have diabetes, it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
So individualized advice is key here. What kind of things would a doctor consider when advising someone with diabetes about fasting?
Well, they'd look at the type of diabetes you have, how severe it is, what medications you're on, your overall health, and your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Based on all that, they might adjust your medication doses or like when you take them
Okay.
to minimize those risks during those fasting periods. For example, someone taking meds that lower blood sugar, they might need to adjust the timing so their blood sugar doesn't drop too low while they're fasting.
Right. So it's like you got to recalibrate your whole system to handle this, like big change in eating patterns.
Exactly. And then there's insulin, which, a lot of people with diabetes depend on.
Right.
If you're on a fixed insulin regimen, you might need to switch to something more flexible so you can adjust the dose based on your blood sugar throughout the day.
So constant monitoring becomes super important, and having a clear plan with your doctor is non-negotiable.
Absolutely.
But what about people with diabetes who are already having a tough time managing their condition? Is fasting even an option for them?
That's a really important question. And it just goes to show how important it is to get personalized medical advice.
Right.
Sources point out a few groups where fasting is generally not recommended.
Okay.
And that includes those with uncontrolled diabetes. Remember that quote from the Quran we talked about before? It basically says that Islam doesn't require people to fast if it's going to seriously harm their health.
Right. So putting your well-being first is more important than strictly following the rules.
Exactly.
But it's not just people with uncontrolled diabetes who need to be careful, right? Our sources mentioned a few other groups too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like children, for instance.
Yeah.
They're still growing, developing, and they need consistent nutrition. Making them fast could really interfere with that.
Okay. And what about older adults? I imagine they might be more prone to complications from fasting too.
You're right. Older people are more likely to get dehydrated, and they could experience other health problems from fasting.
Yeah.
Plus, they often have like pre-existing conditions that could get worse if they fast.
Right. Right. And of course, pregnant and breastfeeding women are also on that list. Why is fasting discouraged for them?
Well, both pregnancy and breastfeeding, they put a huge demand on the body for nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
Fasting could potentially deprive both the mom and the baby of those essential nutrients they need.
So it seems like there's a common thread here. Anyone whose body's under extra stress or has those specific nutritional needs,
Yeah.
they should really think twice before fasting and definitely talk to a healthcare professional first.
Couldn't agree more. And we shouldn't forget about people with physically demanding jobs, too.
Right, right.
Fasting can lead to fatigue, dizziness, even accidents in those situations. Safety always comes first.
That's a really good point. We've talked a lot about hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia as potential risks of fasting for those with diabetes. But our sources also mention a more serious complication, diabetic ketoacidosis.
Right.
That sounds pretty scary. Can you break that down for us a little?
Sure. So when your body doesn't have enough insulin to use glucose for energy, it starts breaking down fat instead.
Okay.
And this process releases ketones into your bloodstream. Now, in small amounts, ketones are no big deal.
Right.
But during prolonged fasting, especially without enough insulin, those ketones can build up, and that makes your blood acidic.
So it's like the body's trying to find another way to fuel itself, but it backfires.
Exactly. Diabetic ketoacidosis is a serious medical emergency, and it needs immediate treatment.
Okay, so we've established that Ramadan fasting, while spiritually meaningful, it's definitely not for everyone.
Right.
But our sources also talk about other forms of fasting, like intermittent fasting, which has gotten pretty popular for weight loss.
Yeah, that's true. We even have Jean Paul's experience from that French radio segment. He talks about combining fasting with exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the nutritionist's perspective on the potential benefits and risks of intermittent fasting. It's really interesting how fasting has gone beyond just religion and become part of like mainstream health and wellness.
It definitely shows how interested people are in finding different approaches to health and well-being.
Yeah.
But no matter the reason for fasting, whether it's religious, health-related, or just personal, it sounds like careful consideration and ideally some professional guidance are really important.
Absolutely. Now that we've explored those potential risks, Why don't we switch gears and look at some practical tips for healthy fasting?
Okay,
Especially during Ramadan. Our sources have some great advice on this.
perfect. Because even if someone's healthy and chooses to fast, there are still ways to do it safely and minimize those potential risks. So what are some of the key takeaways from our sources?
Well, staying hydrated is like the most important thing. Well, staying hydrated is like the most important thing, especially in warmer climates. Our sources recommend drinking plenty of water between iftar and suhoor.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you're not eating or drinking during the day, you got to make sure you're replenishing those fluids, right, in the evening and early morning.
Exactly. And it's not just about what you drink, but also what you eat during those non-fasting hours.
Right, right.
Our sources really emphasize choosing nutrient-rich foods for both suhoor and iftar.
So what would like a healthy, balanced plate look like for someone who's fasting?
Okay, so think complex carbohydrates for sustained energy. Foods like whole grains, lentils, beans.
Okay.
Lean proteins like fish, chicken, tofu. Those are great for muscle repair.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, lots of fruits and vegetables for vitamins, minerals, and fiber. Basically, you want a colorful plate with lots of variety so you get all those nutrients.
Makes sense. Got to make each meal count, right? Give your body what it needs, especially when you're fasting for most of the day. Are there any foods you should like specifically avoid during those non-fasting hours?
Yeah, our sources say to watch out for sugary and processed foods.
Yep.
They give you a quick burst of energy, but then you crash later.
Right.
Not ideal when you're fasting.
No, not at all. It's like setting yourself up for this like roller coaster of energy when you're also dealing with the challenges of fasting. Any other dietary recommendations?
Oh, yeah. They also say to go easy on the caffeine and salt,
Right.
because those can make you dehydrated.
Makes sense. Important to be mindful of those things when you're already trying to stay hydrated. What about exercise? Can you work out while you're fasting?
You can, but light exercise is good.
Okay.
But strenuous activities during the fasting hours, best to avoid those.
Yeah, yeah.
Like gentle walks or stretching, those can be beneficial. But, pushing yourself too hard when your body's already depleted, that's not a good idea.
No, no. Good reminder to listen to your body. Don't overdo it. What about after Ramadan ends? Anything people should keep in mind as they go back to their normal eating habits?
Yeah, our sources recommend easing back into it gradually.
Okay.
Don't go from 0 to 100 overnight. That can really shock your system.
Right. Easing back into your routine, giving your body time to adjust. That's good advice for any kind of diet change, really. It's interesting how fasting is connected to both physical health and mental well-being.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The nutritionist we heard from, they mentioned that fasting can give you this sense of control and accomplishment,
Mhm.
but it can also affect your mood and energy levels. So you got to pay attention to how you're feeling and maybe seek professional guidance if you need it.
Yeah, that's important. Our minds and bodies are connected. So any big change to your routine, like fasting, can impact both.
For sure.
What really stood out to you from everything we talked about today?
I think for me, it's that emphasis on informed awareness.
Right.
Whether you're fasting for religious reasons, trying out intermittent fasting, or just curious about the topic, it's all about having the knowledge to make choices that are right for you, that align with your needs and your beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Understanding why you're fasting, being aware of the risks, and getting personalized guidance, those are all super important for a safe and meaningful experience.
Really is. It's been a really insightful deep dive today, exploring everything from, the spiritual heart of Ramadan to the practical side of managing diabetes while fasting.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that there's no one answer when it comes to fasting. What works for one person might not work for another, and talking to healthcare providers and religious leaders is key.
So as we wrap up this exploration of fasting, what's one key takeaway you'd like to leave our listeners with?
That's a good question. I guess it's this. How can we honor our own individual needs and beliefs while still participating in these meaningful cultural and religious practices, like fasting?
It's a question we're thinking about, how we navigate these ancient traditions in our modern world.
Yeah.
That's a great point to leave everyone with. Ultimately, the choice to fast and how you approach it, it's a personal one. But hopefully this deep dive has given our listeners some valuable information and insights to help them on their journey.
Yeah, I hope so too. Knowledge is power.
It really is.
And when it comes to something as complex as fasting, that power comes from making informed decisions and putting your well-being first.
Well said. Until next time, keep diving deep, everyone.